Hi everyone and welcome to Katy. I'm Ceri Griffiths, one of the award-winning designers here, and I just wanted to share with you a nice little tutorial about how I make Narcissus. Now, I'm going to be using a few products you're probably very familiar with. I'm using the Katy Daffodil mould, and I'm going to be using hearty air drying clay. Now, to look at the mould, I've got two sizes of trumpet and I've got two sizes of backing petals. This will obviously that will make the smaller flower, that will make the larger flower. Now make sure you watch to the end because I'm actually going to show you a couple of hints and tips where I take the Narcissus and the daffodil to the next level. So let's get started. First of all, the thing I like to do is I want to make a veiner for the back of this so that I don't have a flat surface. Now I'm going to take a little bit of white vegetable fat on my finger. In Britain it's usually Trex, in America and parts of Europe it's usually Crisco. I'm just going to rub that in there, not because I need it to release. The mold is high quality silicone, it will release anyway. I just put that in there to help it stick in there, believe it or not, just for a little bit. Now here I have some of the hearty air drying clay. This is a little bit of the yellow mixed with a little bit of the orange mixed with a little bit of the white, just to take it down a tone for me. Let's move that to one side. Now, I personally mold it into a seamless ball, start at one end and work my way along using a rocking finger with my axe. Like this, take that off the end there. Once I've done that, all I need to do is just wiggle the mold and out it comes. Now this piece here, I would let dry completely. So I've got one here that I let dry before, and this is what I use as my extra veiner. Now you will note there is a slight size difference. Air drying clay will actually shrink by about 10 to 12%. That's not a problem, and we'll combat that as we're using it. So once I've got that dried, I'll leave that to one side. Now let's start the flower itself. So again, I've already put white vegetable fat in there. I don't need to do it every single time. Just once every now and then is enough. So starting again at one end, I'm going to work my way along with a rocking action with my fingertips all the way till I get to the end. Make sure it's relatively smoothed out. You don't want it overly thick. You just want it level with the top of the mold so that it's nice and flush. Once you've done that, and this is another important bit, this piece, which is my back veiner, I'm going to dust it with a bit of corn flour and just brush off the excess. The reason I do that is wet clay will stick to wet clay. Wet clay will sometimes grab or stick to dry clay. So I don't want it to stick at this point. Now I'm going to lay this on top, and I'm going to lay it so the top edge in the middle matches. As you can see, there is a bit of shrinkage, but in this process it's not going to matter much. I just want the center of the trumpet veined. So I'm going to gently press down on this. You don't need to really press down hard. If I pull that away, you'll now see I've got detailing on the inside of my trumpet as well as the outside of my trumpet. Again, give it a bit of a wiggle and pop that piece out. Now it's very noticeable what is the outside of the trumpet and what is the inside of the trumpet. So just remember that when you're doing the next step. Let's put that to one side. Now, for the next step, I'm going to be using a modeling tool or a cone tool. However, if you don't have one of these, you could actually use the end of a pen, which has a very similar shape to this, or you could even use a pencil. We're working in air drying clay, so it's not food. There are no contamination issues here. I'm also going to use a little bit of PVA glue, and what I've done is I've mixed 2 parts PVA with 1 part water, just so I've got a really soft consistency. So if I take a little bit of that on a paintbrush, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to run a line of it down the inside edge. I don't need to do the outside edge, just the inside edge where they're going to meet. And I'm going to take my cone tool and just wrap it around, or if you're using a pen or a biro, you can do it that way. Now, where the edges meet, I try not to pinch them with my fingers because I could actually distort the veining. So I come in with a toothpick or a cocktail stick and just press them together just to make sure they're nicely in contact. After a few seconds, they're going to stick to each other anyway. So once I've done that, just sit it upside down for a second while you prepare yourself for the next piece. Now next we're going to be using something that's known in the cake world as a Dresden tool, or you can do exactly the same thing with the rounded end of a paintbrush. So we're going to be using this end here. You can do the same thing with this end here. I would recommend putting a bit of corn flour or cornstarch on your fingers, turn the center upside down, and then wherever it's thickened, I'm going to pull that out to add a little bit of a ruffle effect to the trumpet of this Narcissus. It just adds a little bit of realism to it. Don't worry if you distort the trumpet slightly as you're working, because we can just easily work that back out in a moment. If you do find this gap opens up a little bit, use the end of a toothpick and just put a little bit more glue and touch it together and hold it for a second, and you'll be totally fine at that point. So you can reshape this as we go around. So once it's relatively rounded as it is there, I would then just sit that upside down. I get maybe a bit of kitchen towel, kitchen paper, and I just sit it upside down, and I would leave that. And I just make several of them. So let's let that to one side. As you can see, that's what it looks like. Leave it to one side. And we're going to now make the back petals for this. Now, when we look at this, we've used the large here. It would be exactly the same process for the small. I need 2 sets of these propellers here, which would be the back petals. Now, if I was making a daffodil, I would have made the trumpet that orangey color, and I would have made the back petals a yellowish color. So for me, I now need to make these white, because this bloom actually has white petals at the back and a yellow trumpet. So same process as before. Take a little bit of the white vegetable fat, just wipe it in there. You're not looking for a lot of it. Take a small piece of the air drying clay. This is the hearty white directly out of the pack. I always condition it slightly by working it in my thumbs. Press it down, and what you want to do is work it up those 3 propellers. Now, I tend to put a lot of paste in and then work it into the mold and remove the excess. You can do the reverse. You could start with a smaller bit and then add extra pieces to it. It is completely up to you. There is no right or wrong. It's however you want to work. So try to make sure that all of the excess clay has been taken away. So all you've got in the mold is actually the bits that you need for the petal. You should, at the end of the process, be able to see the edges of the mold. So push that down. So as I prise this apart, it should just drop straight out like that. Now, you have to do 2 of them, and I didn't prepare one in advance because they have to both be soft. They don't need to be dried to do this process. So again, quickly coming in, manipulating that clay into the mold. It's a very, very simple process. If you do find your fingers sticky, you can always put a bit of cornstarch on your fingers or corn flour, and that will help the tackiness go. Now, while I'm doing this, these petals here, if I was putting these into arrangement on a card, or putting them onto maybe a scrapbook piece, I could do each of these as individual pieces in green to mimic leaves. Now, the leaves for a daffodil family or narcissus family are long blade-like petals. However, those can be easily damaged. So if you're doing an arrangement with them in, then just use a bit of green and actually just use that section of it. So pop that one out as well. Always make sure you put your clay under something while you're working. So let's bring back in this board just so we've got a better look at what we're looking at. So the elements of the flower we were making is the trumpet and the 2 backs. Now, take the one propeller piece, take the opposite propeller piece, and actually lay them over the top. And remember, these are both soft at this point. They've not been allowed to dry. I then take the end of a paintbrush and I just press the one into another. Just make a little bit of a hole or a little bit of divot in the middle, because that's where your trumpet is going to sit. Once I've done that, I will take a little bit of that white PVA glue again. I don't need a lot because the glue, the clay will want to stick to itself. I will turn that upside down, gently press it in. Remember, this will be fully dried for you. I've worked wet on wet here, but that could be fully dried, and that will give you the Narcissus. Okay, now let's look at how I take this to the next level. Currently, this is just a white flower with a yellow trumpet. One of the telltale things of this particular flower is it has a darker orange or a darker red rim to it. So if I bring in here a tile, I'm using a tile instead of a paint palette. I'm going to take a little bit of red acrylic paint. You could actually use anything that you use on paper is good for this. So you could use an ink, a permanent ink. You could use water-based. I would just be really aware if it's water-based, because if it's water-based, it could smudge if you got any humidity. You could also use orange if you want. You could use a darker yellow. I tend to make it quite pale red, as you can see, and I just come in and I just catch the edges of my flower. Let's pull it around, and that all of a sudden will take it to one of the Narcissus family. So that's what we're looking at there. So let's take that out of the way for us. Now, let's have a look. So when it comes to a daffodil, it's exactly the same process, and there are two sizes. However, what I want to show you is what I did next, which is I've turned the daffodil, and that's the daffodil, and I've actually put stamens into the center of it. So I want to put stamens into the center of this one just to show you how you can elevate it to the next level. So let's just move the daffodil to one side there. Now, as far as stamens go, you can buy stamens in pretty much any crafting shop nowadays. They're readily available. You can get them on the internet. They're fine. So I've chosen pale yellow here. I'm just going to take 3 of them. I'll lay them on my black pad so you can actually see what I'm doing, because they are very fine. Now, I take the 3 of them. I make sure the ends are all together. I then fold this in half. Once it's folded in half, I hold all of the heads in my finger. I then take my mould and I line it up so that I'm in the center. Now, as you can see, I want to cut about halfway because the stamens are naturally countersunk into this flower. So taking a small pair of scissors, I'll come to about halfway. Excuse me, I'll cut that off screen. There you go. Now, keep them together, put them on your little bit of a board. I'm only doing it here so you can just see where they are. Keep them in a group. Then take the smallest pinch you can of the clay that you actually made the center of your narcissus or your daffodil with, and make a little ball of it. Pick up all of your little stamens and tap them gently so that all of them are at the same level. If all of the heads are at the same level, the ends should be as well. Then I take a little bit of glue on my glue brush, not a lot, and I just touch it into it. I don't want it to be sopping wet. I just want a little bit. I will just tap off any excess, and then I push that into the ball. Just manipulate it round. Once you're happy it's all involved, mold it to a slight pointed shape. Then take your narcissus, take a little bit more of the glue, go right down in the center. You don't need a lot for this. Just touch it down into the center. Make sure it is in there. You should be able to see it at the bottom. Now, PVA glue will actually dry clear anyway. I'm going to take the stamens, lift them up, drop them in. Now, at this point, you can gently press on the stamens, which will embed them. So that's how I've got a natural looking narcissi. I've also got the daffodil. And if I was to look, I've got a smaller version here. So that's the smaller version of the daffodil and the smaller version of the narcissi. That's one that I haven't painted the rim to, just to show you that even if you don't paint the rim, you actually get a really realistic view of them. So hopefully you've enjoyed that tutorial. Again, I was using Hearty white clay, the Hearty air drying clay that we sell here at Katy Design. A brilliant product, doesn't need to go in the oven. It's completely air drying. It's completely safe to use. I love it. It's very, very lightweight, and the size of the packs are very economical. They go a very long way. Don't forget, if you are making yourself one of these back veiners, which I like to do to get the interior veining in there, make sure it's completely dry, and then dust it with a bit of cornstarch before you press it into the wet clay. Otherwise, it will stick on you. The stamens are just regular little seed head stamens. So, hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.